Stomp the Yard looked unstoppable until real fraternities threatened to shut it down before a single ticket sold. Two R&B superstars stepped in front of a camera for the very first time, and one of them was so nervous his heartbeat felt louder than the music. Today you'll get 5 revelations that completely change how you see this movie, and there's one jaw-dropping bonus waiting at the end that almost nobody talks about. So speed up with me, because the list starts now. Number 1. A real Stomp tour. Columbus Short didn't learn to step for a movie role. He'd already lived it. Years before he ever read the script for Stomp the Yard, Short was touring the country with the off-Broadway production of Stomp, the percussive show built entirely around rhythm, bodies, and sound. He graduated high school 2 months early just so he could join that tour. Boots hitting metal, hands clapping in unison, bodies moving like instruments. That was his actual training ground, not a rehearsal studio. So when casting directors watched his audition tape, they weren't looking at an actor faking confidence. They were looking at someone who'd been stepping since before stepping was cool. The studio never had to teach him the choreography. They just had to point a camera and let him do what he'd already mastered. That authenticity is part of why every step sequence in the film feels lived in instead of staged. He'd even worked as a choreographer on tour for Britney Spears. So the man already understood how to command a stage long before Hollywood noticed. Number 2. The name almost clashed. This movie wasn't always called Stomp the Yard. The original title was simply Steppin, clean, direct, and tied straight to the culture it was celebrating. The script was locked, the budget was approved, and then the studio noticed a problem brewing across town. Another dance movie, Step Up, starring Channing Tatum, was about to hit theaters that same year. 2 films with nearly identical themes and nearly identical titles, releasing within months of each other, was a recipe for confused audiences and split box office numbers. So the studio made a fast call and changed the name. They landed on Stomp the Yard, a title that nodded both to the stepping tradition and to the percussive roots Columbus Short had lived through on that Broadway tour. It hit harder, sounded bigger, and gave the film an identity nobody could mistake for something else. That title became iconic. But for one brief moment, the movie that would define a generation of stepping culture almost shared a name with a film about ballroom dancing in Baltimore. If you are enjoying this, take 2 seconds and leave a like. Subscribe if you want more videos like this. That support really motivates my work and helps a lot with bringing more content. Number 3. 2 R&B debuts. Stomp the Yard marked the very first acting roles for 2 enormous R&B names, Ne-Yo and Chris Brown. Both were already chart-topping artists with massive followings, and neither had stood in front of a film camera for longer than a music video shoot. Ne-Yo played Rich, DJ's loud and energetic roommate who eventually becomes his closest ally. The personality came naturally to him, but the stepping itself didn't. Ne-Yo later admitted the hand-eye coordination required for stepping was unlike anything he'd ever attempted. It wasn't just rhythm, it demanded attitude, precision, and real respect for the tradition. Chris Brown had an even tighter window. He was mid-tour when the offer came in, flew straight to set, and had only 2 days to learn the choreography and 1 day to learn his lines before cameras rolled on his role as Durant, DJ's younger brother. 2 musicians, 2 crash courses in acting, and both stepped straight into Hollywood without looking back. Number 4. A boycott threat. Before this film even reached theaters, it was already under attack. Alpha Phi Alpha, one of the oldest and most respected black fraternities in the country, threatened to organize a full boycott. The reason was trademark infringement. Producers Will Packer and Rob Hardy, both Alpha Phi Alpha members themselves, had used the fraternity's letters, symbols, and branding throughout the script without securing official permission, assuming their own membership would cover it. It didn't. Fraternity leadership didn't see a tribute. They saw unauthorized use of imagery they considered sacred. Alpha Kappa, Alpha Sorority joined the fight too, making it clear that Greek organizations weren't going to let Hollywood profit off their legacy without consent. The threat was serious. A boycott from these organizations could have crippled the film's credibility before it ever reached the audience it was made for. Suddenly, a movie built to honor Black Greek life was in danger of being rejected by the very community it was trying to celebrate. Number 5. Sony erased the symbols. Sony didn't negotiate. They surrendered completely. To avoid the boycott and the legal mess attached to it, the studio made 2 massive moves. First, they digitally scrubbed every single Alpha Phi Alpha reference out of the finished film. Letters, colors, and branding that could be traced back to the real fraternity were erased frame by frame in post-production, an expensive and time-consuming fix that changed the texture of scenes that had already been shot. The fictional organizations in the film, Theta Nu Theta and Mu Gamma Chi, had to be scrubbed completely clean of any real-world overlap. Second, Sony made a donation to the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Foundation as a gesture of goodwill. The message was simple: we made a mistake, we're correcting it, and we're paying for it. The boycott was called off and the film released on schedule, but behind the scenes, two producers who loved their fraternity had unintentionally disrespected it, and the whole studio learned a hard lesson about asking first. Number 6. 5 times the budget. Stomp the Yard was made on a shoestring. $13 million is nothing for a studio film with multiple campuses, hundreds of extras, and elaborate group choreography to coordinate. But Sony took the gamble, and it paid off in a massive way. The film opened at number 1 with a $22 million opening weekend and held a spot in the box office top 5 for weeks afterward. By the end of its theatrical run, it had pulled in $61 million domestically, nearly 5 times its original budget. And that number doesn't even include home video sales or the cult following it built on college campuses nationwide. The numbers proved something the industry had been ignoring for years: that authentic stories told by and for Black audiences could dominate the box office against bigger budgets and bigger stars. This wasn't a fluke. It became a blueprint other studios studied for years afterward, proof that trusting the culture instead of diluting it could pay off enormously. Number 7. Megan almost said no. Meagan Good almost didn't take this role at all. When she read the script, she saw the same character she'd been offered for years: the love interest who exists mainly to support the male lead and look good doing it. She was tired of it. She'd been working in the industry since childhood and wanted roles with actual depth instead of standing on the sidelines looking concerned. So her first instinct was to pass entirely. Then she found out who'd been cast as the lead: Columbus Short, a childhood friend she'd known since she was 10 years old. They'd grown up in overlapping circles, and she already knew exactly how much talent he had. That single detail changed everything. Good didn't take the role because the script suddenly improved. She took it because she trusted her friend and knew their chemistry would feel real on screen instead of manufactured in rehearsal. That bet paid off. Every glance and every tense moment between their characters lands because the friendship behind it was already 15 years deep. Number 8. 2 days to learn it. Chris Brown walked onto set with almost no preparation time at all. He was in the middle of a promotional tour when the offer for the role of Duran came through, said yes, and then had to figure out how to make it work on a brutal schedule. He flew in with exactly 2 days to rehearse every dance sequence and 1 single day to memorize his lines. No weeks of training, no time to build chemistry with the rest of the cast, just show up and deliver. And somehow, he pulled it off. Brown later said he wasn't actually worried about the dancing itself. His fans already knew he could move. What concerned him was the acting. He wanted audiences to see him disappear into a character rather than just perform a routine. So he poured his focus into the relationship between Duran and his on-screen brother DJ. And in the film's tragic opening minutes, that focus landed harder than any step routine in the entire movie. Before we keep going, subscribe if you haven't yet. Drop a comment telling me which movie or show you want me to cover next with strange behind-the-scenes facts. I read every single one. Number 9. The fraternity forgave them. The story doesn't end with the boycott. 2 years after Stomp the Yard became a cultural phenomenon, something unexpected happened. Alpha Phi Alpha forgave them. In 2009, the same fraternity that once threatened to derail the film honored producers Will Packer and Rob Hardy at their national convention, not with an apology, but with an actual award. Leadership recognized that despite the trademark mess, the movie had done something powerful. It pulled stepping into the cultural mainstream and put Black Greek life in front of millions of people who'd never seen it represented before. Packer and Hardy stood on that stage and probably exhaled for the first time in 2 years. A boycott that could have ended their careers instead became a lesson in accountability. They didn't get a pass for being members. They got held to a higher standard, and when they made it right, the organization met them halfway. The film that almost got canceled by the very community it celebrated became one of the most important pieces of media in Black Greek history. Number 10. 2,000 Hidden Extras. The film's climactic National Step Championship needed a massive, electric crowd. Thousands of people cheering, booing, and reacting to every single move on stage, and the filmmakers refused to fake it. So they hosted an actual stepping competition and filled the venue with more than 2,000 real people. Here's the twist. Most of them had no idea they were being filmed for a movie at all. The production advertised it as a legitimate step show, and real fraternities and sororities showed up to genuinely compete, while real fans came to genuinely watch. Every reaction in that room was authentic because nobody in the crowd was acting. When one team hit the stage, the eruption was real. When a rival team countered, the boos were real too. Cameras rolled the entire time, capturing emotion that simply could not be scripted or rehearsed. When the film finally hit theaters, thousands of people recognized themselves on screen and realized they'd unknowingly become part of movie history. Number 11. A Campus Built by Freed Slaves. The film was shot at Morris Brown College in Atlanta, and that location wasn't just a convenient backdrop, it carried real history. Morris Brown was founded in 1885 by freed slaves, making it one of the first institutions of higher learning created by and for African Americans in the South. For over a century, it stood as a symbol of resilience and education. By the time filming began in 2006, the college was in crisis. Enrollment had collapsed and accreditation had been lost, but the buildings and the history were still standing. Filmmakers saw an opportunity to honor that legacy rather than ignore it. Shooting there gave the production a weight no soundstage could replicate. A genuine connection to the real foundations of Black Greek life. Students who could no longer afford to stay enrolled watched filming happen from the edges of campus, and some even worked as extras. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. A movie about stepping into greatness was being filmed at a college that had once represented exactly that, and its role in this film remains permanent even as the school keeps fighting to return. Number 12. Keeping rivals apart. Bringing real Greek life onto a Hollywood set came with real complications. Production hired actual fraternity members as extras and consultants, and while the organizations on screen were fictional, the men playing them weren't, and some carried genuine rivalries and old tensions from real campus competitions that had nothing to do with the movie itself. The production team quickly realized that if rival members got too close between takes, things could escalate fast. So they made a call: keep them separated, with different holding areas, different call times, and different sides of the set entirely. It wasn't about distrust, it was about respect for how competitive and prideful stepping culture genuinely is. The last thing anyone needed was a real conflict erupting over a fictional rivalry. The strategy worked, the energy on screen stayed sharp and controlled, the stepping stayed fierce, and the authenticity everyone wanted came through without any of the chaos behind the scenes. Sometimes honoring a culture means understanding its fire well enough to handle it carefully. Number 13. His real college experience. Columbus Short has said it more than once. Stomp the Yard basically was his college experience. He never attended a traditional university, never pledged a fraternity, never lived in a dorm or crossed a quad with a backpack full of textbooks. But the moment he stepped onto this set, something clicked. The brotherhood, the competition, the pride, the bond between men who choose each other and build something together. That felt completely real to him. Short threw himself into the role so fully that the line between acting and actually living it began to blur. He wasn't performing as his character DJ, he was becoming him. The rehearsals felt like pledging, the conflicts with his rival felt personal, and the relationships with his on-screen brothers felt like family. When filming wrapped, he didn't just walk away from a job, he walked away from an experience that genuinely shaped him. He's called it one of the most important projects of his career, not for the box office numbers, but because it gave him a taste of belonging to something bigger than himself, the college he never actually attended, and he graduated with honors. Quick reminder to subscribe if you are enjoying these revelations. And tell me in the comments, do you know any strange fact about this movie that I didn't mention? Let's build the list together. Number 14. Almost a sequel. Before this became its own story, it almost wasn't one at all. Producer Will Packer originally pitched the project as a direct sequel to You Got Served, the 2004 dance film that earned $40 million at the box office. The idea seems simple on paper. Take the street dance energy from that first film and transplant it onto a historically black college campus. Swap crumping for stepping and Los Angeles for Atlanta, while keeping the same competition and underdog framework. You Got Served already had a built-in audience, so a sequel could ride that existing wave with minimal risk. But then Packer and his team realized something important. Stepping wasn't just another dance style, it was an entire culture and tradition that deserved its own film, rather than a spin-off riding someone else's momentum. So they scrapped the sequel concept entirely and started fresh with new characters and a new sense of respect for what stepping actually represents. That single decision changed everything, because as a forgettable sequel, this film would have vanished. Instead, it became a phenomenon that stood completely on its own. Almost at the end, and the best is still coming. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next, and drop your city or country in the comments. I want to see how far this video is reaching. Number 15, a nationwide competition. Sony didn't just make a movie about stepping. The studio actually invested directly in the culture itself. To promote the film, Sony launched a nationwide high school stepping competition, and schools from across the country entered. Teams rehearsed for months because the stakes felt genuinely real. The winning team would be featured in the film's promotional campaign and gain national recognition almost overnight. High schoolers who had been stepping in gymnasiums and auditoriums suddenly had an actual platform and a real chance to be seen on a national stage. The competition came down to the finals, and North Stafford High School in Stafford, Virginia, took the crown with precision and energy that honored the tradition completely. Sony kept their promise, and that winning team became a permanent part of this film's legacy. The competition did more than sell tickets. It reminded an entire generation of young people that stepping wasn't just something you watched in a theater, it was something you could actually live. For one high school team in Virginia, it became the moment that changed everything. Bonus: the fear no one saw. Here's the part almost nobody talks about. Behind the cameras, one of the film's biggest names was quietly terrified before his very first major dance sequence. Stepping into stepping wasn't like recording a song in a studio booth. It meant performing live, in formation, in front of an entire crew, with zero room to fix a mistake after the fact. By his own admission, the coordination required felt completely foreign, and the pressure of representing a tradition this respected made his heart pound so hard he was convinced the boom mic overhead would somehow pick it up. What turned things around wasn't more rehearsal time, it was the people standing next to him. Castmates who already understood the culture refused to let him fail quietly in a corner. They walked him through counts between takes, matched his rhythm so he had something steady to lock onto, and made sure he never felt like the outsider in the room. That kind of on-set support rarely makes it into any official behind-the-scenes reel, but it's part of why his performance reads as confident instead of nervous. The cast protected each other long before the cameras ever caught the polished version everyone eventually saw in theaters. And those were 15 strange facts about Stomp the Yard, plus one bonus nobody usually mentions. This film matters more than people give it credit for, because it turned a real campus tradition into a box office phenomenon without losing the respect that tradition deserved. If you made it this far, leave a like, subscribe, and comment which fact surprised you the most. And don't forget to suggest another movie that deserves a list of strange facts. See you in the next video.